Well, welcome everybody. I think we are going to get started. Have a good crowd and I see that there's more folks joining, so I'm going to kick us off. Hello and welcome to United Way's virtual community baby shower series. I'm Carly. I'm the head of our community impact team at United Way. I'm also a mom to 2 kids, an 8-year-old and a 13-year-old. So as a parent to all the folks here who are parents or soon to be parents, congratulations to all of you. We so miss the chance to be with you in person, but are really excited to be celebrating with you virtually. Actually, 11 years ago, a colleague, Lanita, and I brought the community baby shower to United Way of Massachusetts Bay. And it's been so amazing to see how it's grown over the last years. When we first started this, we were in a multi-purpose room at Hibernian Hall in Roxbury, and to think from there that we would be celebrating with families on Zoom is really, really incredible, and certainly not something I could have imagined. We have a great week of events coming up, starting with today's presentation by Boston Children's Hospital on health and safety. We're so grateful to our sponsors, our donors, all of our community partners that have assisted with planning all of these virtual events, and all of the organizations that'll be co-hosting and presenting this week. We really hope that you are all able to tune in as much as possible over the course of this week and check out the resources that we're going to be sharing by email. We'd love to know who's here with us today. So if you are comfortable, please put in your first name, your city, and then your children's ages in the chat. And I'll chat mine after, but as I said, my name's Carly. I live in Jamaica Plain and I have 2 daughters, 13 and 8 years old. We are going to be kicking off this week of events with information on adjusting to new parenting, well-check visit information, and child safety. All of you that are attending today are going to be entered to win a car seat. The winner will be notified right after the event. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing partner at Boston Children's Hospital, Aisha Kemertz, who I get to work with all the time on lots of things for children throughout the city of Boston. Thank you, Aisha, and thank you all of us for joining us again today.
A los niños de Boston. Muchas gracias por reunirse el día de hoy. Gracias.
It is such a pleasure to be here. I work with Boston Children's Hospital in our Office of Community Health. That is the part of the hospital really focused on supporting all members of the communities that surround our hospital and the facilities where we work. And we're just so proud every day to be committed to working to support families with young children. I too am a mother of a 3- and 6-year-old, so really celebrate seeing all of you coming here today for support. So just want to make sure you're aware, we're going to focus on adjusting to parenting and stress management and supports, really the role of primary care and well child visits, and also learning a little bit about how to keep your kids safe at home with injury prevention tips. Please feel free to put questions into the Q&A as you have them. Just hit the Q&A box down below, and the staff will be keeping an eye on those questions, and we'll have time for Q&A after all of the presenters have finished. So we're going to start off with Aditi Subramaniam from MSPCC, the Mass Society for the Protection of Children, talking about adjusting to being a new parent. Welcome, Aditi.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, United Way, for having us here today. Welcome, everybody, and congratulations on your parenthood journey. My name is Aditi Subramaniam, and I work at the Mass Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children. And my role is supporting the infant early childhood workforce across the state in collaboration with the Mass Association for Infant Mental Health. I'm also a parent of a 5-year-old, soon to be 6-year-old. And so welcome all of you on your journey. So our time together today will ever so briefly talk about really the transition to parenthood and all the feelings that come up, and how do we really look out for our village. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the process of really becoming parents, right? As congratulations on your journey, and as we become parents, we're not only making space for our child, that is a physical space, but also thinking about a psychological space. Like, what does it feel like for this other little person to enter our life? And what that requires us to do is really shift and reorganize how we see ourselves moving from our identities of like from a woman, a man, a partner, a professional, to really creating space for the mother, father, being in relationship with this little person. Can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. And so when we think about as we are transitioning into this new identity and new roles, there are some key themes that are always coming to mind. One of the most important is my baby going to be healthy and well, right? I want to be able to form a close bond with my baby. I want to connect with my baby, and I want my baby to connect with me. The third is, who's my village? Who are here to support me? Who is my village to take care of me? And then the last one being, I hope that I'm really a good or a good enough parent, right? Am I really going to be all that my baby needs me to be? And so these are thoughts, whether for a mother, a father, these are like key themes that are constantly in our mind. And when we think about it, all of us were parented at some point, right? So we draw from our own experiences of our early experiences with our families on how we relate with our babies. Every parent wants to give the best they can for their child. And so as we become parents, we're also trying to rework our relationships with our parents, with our ancestors, to really bring that wisdom in, and then start to think about the feelings about how might I be as a parent? How might my baby be? And then as we really think about this, what makes it really in the moment is the back and forth with your baby. And both not just talking, but really non-verbally. We parent from what our experiences of how we were parented. And so as our babies come into the world or are already here with you, your baby comes into the world with their own capacities and their own personhood. And so as that back and forth is happening through everyday interactions, because it's all set in relationships, that is the dance of parenting that really then helps us constantly figure out, oh, as I'm connecting with my baby, this is what's happening in our relationship. This is how my child's social emotional development is. This is how they are getting to feel loved and seen by me as a parent. Can we move to the next slide, please? And so, what we do know about babies, and this is not just science, but science and wisdom of generations, across the world, right? Before science reached us, there were generations of oral traditions that existed from community wisdom, that young children and babies experience the world and their world as an environment of relationships. So their development happens in the context of their relationships and their earliest nurturing relationships. So their brains are really actually developing based on their relationship with you, on that back and forth with you, that as your baby needs physical safety, they also love and thrive on a nurturing presence. And that's how babies learn to be seen, to be trusted, to feel loved. And so as a parent and a caregiver, that feedback is also what helps us really feel in relationship with our babies. Can we do the next slide, please? And so one of the biggest, right? So as your baby is born, or for folks who have their babies with you, right? Your newborn is born with a lot of capacities, and they also need support, right? So they're born with some amount of immaturity, and as they grow, they develop that. However, it doesn't just happen by magic. You are instrumental in this as a caregiver, and you and your village, right? I'm not just talking about you as an individual parent, but who's holding you. And so thinking about in that back and forth, like with feeding, with holding them sensitively and cuddling them, learning and responding to them like, oh, you did a cry, I respond to your cry. And in the serve and return, this like, my baby says something and I return it back by connecting with them. They make a coo or they make a little ah, and I know exactly what that means, or I'm trying to figure out what that means. Because in our calm, and I will not lie, sometimes it is not very calming, right? It is hard. And as we try to find our moments of calm, your baby learns to figure that out with you, because that back and forth helps them learn this fancy word called mutual regulation, which is nothing but that in your calm, I learned to find my calm as a baby. And that's how we then support each other. But your emotional well-being and health as a parent is really important for your babies. And so which gets us actually to the next slide, which is really thinking about transition to parenthood with all the pieces, right? We see all the amazing pieces of it, whether it's on catalogs or, books. Also wanting to name that in the first few weeks of caring for a newborn, most new moms and dads, there's lots of intense feelings. There could be anxiety, sadness, frustration, tiredness, to name a few, and that can extend for a longer time, feeling a sense of overwhelm. And then you add COVID to it, like birthing during COVID has made all of this really elevate. And so, most your doctors will say this to you, but there's baby blues, which happen for the first few weeks, which is, it usually passes. And for some folks, both men and women, this might not pass and might have a lot stronger feelings, and there may be stronger intense feelings. And that's when we go into thinking about postpartum emotional complications, which could be postpartum depression or anxiety, and really holding with for all of us that postpartum depression and anxiety is not anyone's fault. It is not a weakness when women or men get postpartum depression or experience it. It's completely treatable, and which is why it's so important for us to think about who's my village, who is here to hold me and support me as I'm supporting my baby. And so really thinking about who is your village, and having ways to be able to connect with. We'll share some resources in the next slide, which you can move to the next one. Really thinking about, there is a postpartum support international helpline. There's an English and a Spanish number right on your screen. Being able to contact them if you feel that there's something a little more that I'm not feeling as good about this and I want to get some support. You can always contact your medical provider. All of this is completely confidential, and a caring volunteer really gets in touch with you to be able to listen and answer your questions, and if needed, connect you with a local resource right in your community. We're not meant to parent alone. We're meant to parent in villages. And so really congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much, Aditi, for that exquisite presentation. It really just is a wonderful reminder for me as a mom, and I think very helpful for all of the participants today. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to hearing from Dr. Faye Holder-Niles from Boston Children's Hospital Primary Care, and she's going to share a little bit about the role of primary care and well care visits. Welcome, Dr. Faye.
Thank you, Aisha. Good morning. It's really great to be here to join with our panelists to chat with you this morning. And first, I just want to say congratulations and welcome. It's such an exciting time when you've had a new baby and or you're expecting and planning a new baby. And Aditi said it very nicely. It really takes a village to raise the babies and the families. So in primary care, we also consider ourselves part of your village. And I'm excited to share just some general thoughts and tips as you are in the midst of your journey or beginning your journey with your new baby. First slide, please. Great. So my name is Dr. Faye Holder-Niles, and I am a primary care pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital. And I also serve as the medical director for community primary care in our Office of Community Health. So in short, what that means is I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to meet new moms and new parents and new families and get to help you welcome your baby or little one to our practice. So I'm going to highlight 3 things today. We're going to talk about choosing your pediatrician or your medical care team or your care village. We'll talk about bringing your baby home, and then we'll spend some time talking about the first year visits with your baby. Next slide, please. So choosing your pediatrician is probably next to choosing your OB, one of the most important jobs you'll have as a new parent. This is such an important job and role because for most families, this relationship starts at birth, so shortly after the hospital visit, and oftentimes extend all the way to during the baby years, the toddler years, up through the teen years and young adult years. So it's a pretty important choice as you make it. For some families, including some in the audience, I saw that some have older kids. This is a little bit easier because they may be siblings. So you may have already chosen your pediatrician or your care team. For many families, it's often, word of mouth. You may have a family member or a friend who also have a baby or have kids and can share wonderful stories and wonderful interactions with their care team and may suggest their provider or their pediatrician as well. If you don't have that, certainly some of the things to think about would be location. Would you need a practice or office or health center that's close to your house? Do you need it to be closer to, for example, your daycare, whoever your daycare provider is going to be, or maybe midway so that it's easy to get to in the event of an emergency and or visit? Other things to consider would also be the office hours. Do you need early morning appointments? Are there later appointments available? And certainly weekend appointments if the baby or child is sick. And then certainly one of the big things that we often recommend considering is also the relationship, because you want to pick someone that you can feel connected with, that you feel you can ask all questions and have your questions answered. As a new parent, there's often so many questions. And, as I say to my families, all questions are very good and wonderful. The only bad question is the question not asked. So you really want to feel that you can develop this relationship over time because this care team will partner with you throughout the upcoming months and years of your child's life. And additionally, a lot of offices or practices offer some additional services like lactation support. Some may offer services, for example, WIC, Women, Infant, and Children's Services within their office, and or can provide resource connections to those services as well. So that's one of the first major decisions for you as you choose your care team. Next slide, please. So bringing your baby home, it's such an exciting moment for most families. In the hospital after the baby's born, your pediatrician or your pediatric team or care team, this may include a pediatrician or a nurse practitioner or other members of the care team, will visit with you and your baby in the hospital. They will ensure or help to ensure that feeding is coming along well. For many moms who choose to breastfeed, there's lots of support around breastfeeding. There's also access and support to lactation consultants while you're in the hospital to ensure that that's going well for you. And they'll overview some of the common things that we talk about would be, feeding every 2 to 3 hours. We'll talk about monitoring the wet diapers. We'll talk about initial conversations around sleep. But as you're getting ready and preparing to leave the hospital, things that we'll also review would be the importance of having a car seat to take the baby home. We review safe sleep practices, including ensuring that the baby is sleeping on its back to decrease the incidence of sudden infant death. And there'll be a more in-depth presentation on this after. But those are some of the things we also discuss as you're preparing to take your baby home. But also too, there's some initial discussions around infant support in your village. And just to reinforce, it really takes a village sometimes to do this. And, thinking ahead or thinking through, is it a parent, a family member, a close friend, your partner, who will be part of that village to help support you as you go home and transition to parenthood and motherhood and fatherhood. along this journey. Next slide, please. Oops. So after you've transitioned home, very quickly, we see the baby in the office. And there are lots of reasons for that. As you will realize as well, if you have older kids or this is your first baby, there's several visits in the first year. And a large part of the visit initially is for you to meet your care team. Your care team may be comprised of your pediatrician or doctor. It may comprise of a nurse practitioner who also provides medical care to your family. It will also include the nurses at your doctor's office, medical assistants or clinical assistants who will become and form part of your medical village to help you care for your new infant. As part of the visits during the first year, we also do a lot of check-ins. How are you doing? How is your family adjusting? Are there older siblings? How are they adjusting? Do you have access to a village or connections and support during this really important time in your life and your baby's life? As part of the visits, in terms of the medical part of the visits, we always talk about feeding. We say, how's the baby feeding? You know, how is breastfeeding going? Do you need additional support or help with resources around breastfeeding? For some families who were not able to breastfeed, we check in on how they're feeding, how the formula feeding is going, and ensure that you have ready access to formula and or WIC support if needed. Additionally, we check in on sleep. You know, I would say as a parent myself, I think one of the things I came away with when I had my son was that it's exhausting. You know, those first few days, those first few weeks are exhausting. And, you know, checking in on families, how are you doing with sleep? You know, how is the baby sleeping? Most babies tend to wake every 2 to 3 hours for feeds all day and all night. And that's where the village also comes in terms of supporting you, maybe that you can rest a little bit during the day during one of the feeds as well. A large part of the visit too is centered on development. You know, what kind of things is your baby doing over the course of that first year? And as we do these developmental checks, we remind families that it's on a continuum. There's not one checkbox that we look for when we see you and your baby. Every baby is unique, every baby is special, and every baby does things on sort of their own schedule. You know, sometimes family will say, oh, my older child did this at 6 months and they're not doing it yet. Should I be concerned? Or my next door neighbor's child is doing, you know, is walking, is only 9 months. And those are great things to share with your pediatrician or medical team. But also, you know, as we check, we know that there's a spectrum in terms of, you know, some babies, there's some milestones that every baby achieves. And some of them achieve them at different points throughout the year. And we monitor and ensure that those are occurring and that those are occurring unique for that baby and special for that baby, but also in a timely way. And that also gives us an opportunity, say, for example, if there's a concern that there is any delays or additional supports are needed, that we can make referrals to programs like early intervention or other mommy, baby, or family support systems to help support development. Many of the offices, health centers, and practices are also engaging with the Boston Basics, which my understanding is you guys will have an opportunity to learn more about that during these sessions, which also provide developmental tips and supports in ways that you can also help to support and nurture your baby as they're growing. During these visits, we also provide vaccinations, which are very important during the first year of life. And that occurs at most visits. So we prepare families that, you know, we see you in the newborn period, we see you for a weight check. And then essentially at the 2 month visit, the 4 month visit, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months visit, we get to check in and we check in on all of these things and also ensure that you're up to date. And then a lot of the visit is just really spent supporting families, providing guidance, how to reach our office after hours, how to reach our office if you're worried, if there's any questions or concerns about your baby. There's always, for most practices, always support available, maybe a nursing advice line, a physician on call line, but know that we're here as your medical village to help support you and support your family. Next slide, please. And the other thing I will add, though, is that they grow very quickly. One of the things that someone said to me when I was a new parent was take lots of pictures because they grow so quickly you won't keep track. And it's so true. But they do grow quickly, and they grow into beautiful young toddlers and beautiful young children and beautiful and sometimes challenging teens. But it's a wonderful, wonderful time. And it's a special relationship that you will have with your care team as we support you and support your family on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fay. Again, as a parent, it's wonderful to have those reminders of the incredible resource that the pediatrician can be, both for parents and for children as they grow. So now we're going to move forward and hear from Barbara DiGirolamo from Boston Children's Hospital Injury Prevention Program on well child safety. Thank you, Barbara. Welcome.
Thank you. So like Aisha had said, my name is Barbara DiGirolamo. I'm the Injury Prevention Coordinator at Boston Children's. So basically what my job is to keep kids out of the hospital. And I have an almost 8-year-old, so that will be 8 in a couple weeks, a 5.5 and a 2.5-year-old. So I like to say that I live and breathe injury prevention day in and day out. Are you going to run the slides? Or, perfect. So this is my 5.5-year-old. She's about 2 here. But why do I have the job that I do? That is because preventable injuries kill more than 15,000 kids every year between the ages of 0 and 24. And preventable is the main word here. It is the greatest cause of death for any age group. So 6 times more kids die from an injury than they do from diseases such as cancer or heart disease. If they are under 1, and it's usually because of suffocation, and then 5 to actually adulthood is motor vehicle crashes. And that is only death. 6 million kids sustain injuries serious enough to actually come to their hospital, whether that's their pediatrician or the emergency room. And then, as we know, most parents that have kids with injuries will just, put some ice and a Band-Aid on it. So there's many more that actually never seek medical treatments. So the first thing, especially for your new moms, is what we like to talk about, which is safe sleep. We said that suffocation is the #1 reason children die under the age of 1 year, and generally it's because they're in an unsafe sleeping environment. So you always want to make sure your crib looks exactly like this picture. It does look kind of lonely, but it is super safe. We don't want crib bumpers. We don't want blankets, pillows. You as an adult, if you're uncomfortable or you need to roll over, you can feel yourself, you're able to stimulate to wake up. A child cannot. So they can suffocate in all of these extra things, such as stuffed animals are another big thing. You also want to make sure that you're using a new crib and not a crib that is, at this point, probably 20 years or older. So if you're using a crib from when you were a child that maybe your mom had in her attic, it might not be up to the new safety standards, which is that each slat has to be 2 3/8 inches. Kids were getting their head stuck in them and their legs stuck in them. So as things happen, changes happen, and that is the big one for cribs. Again, you also want to make sure you're using a firm crib mattress. So another thing that we see is people think that the mattress is too hard for the baby and they'll put a blanket under the sheet, and that we don't want any fluffy things that could actually suffocate the baby, because if they roll over, they can't roll themselves back like we can as adults. And of course, you definitely do not want to co-sleep with your child. As Dr. Fay had said, you're waking up every 2 to 3 hours to feed your child. You're going to be exhausted. So if you fall asleep while feeding your child, we've seen really traumatic things happen from that, because your sleeping environment is a lot different than their sleeping environment. And you could also potentially roll over onto your baby, obviously not on purpose, but it does happen. So this is kind of a picture example of SIDS. So we always say back to sleep. So you want them, always want to put your baby to sleep on their back, never on their side or their stomach. Because as you see in this picture, their trachea, so how they breathe, is open when they're on their back. But if they're on their stomach, sleeping position, they can suffocate from the sheet, but it also could block their airway. So as they get older, this is where we see a lot of episodes of things like choking. And there are many reasons for this, mostly because as they get older, you're starting to feed them things like Cheerios, and they don't know the difference between Cheerios and a coin. They just see a small thing and they know the association hand to mouth. So you put the Cheerios in front of them, they grab them, they put them in their mouth. They don't know the difference between any other small toy or object. So we always encourage parents to get on the level of the child, crawl around your floor space. You really, from personal experience, do not know what you have on your floor until you climb into their space, on the rug, under the tables. And also burns are another high number of injuries that we see. So making sure that your water heater is set no more than 120 degrees. And that's even too hot for them. But they have a lot thinner skin, so it burns a lot easier. And if they get a burn, their burns are going to be more deep than us as adults. So continuing with home safety, if you have any stairs in your house, making sure that you have gates at the tops and bottoms. Falls are the leading cause of non-fatal injury for children, and they're usually from either stairs or windows. Window guards, if you are living in a home, if you rent a home, and you have a child that is less than 5, if you request window guards, your landlord in Boston is required to put those on there. So you can always go to your landlord if you need those, but we also recommend opening the windows from the top down as opposed from the bottom up. Now that it's starting to get nicer out and everybody wants that fresh air, we love fresh air. But those screens are meant to keep the bugs out. They're not meant to keep the children in. So one easy push on the screen, that child can fall right out of that window. And my 2-year-old loves looking out the window and waiting for me to come home. And so that could definitely be an easy injury to sustain. The other thing is that we don't want to have any furniture close to the windows, because again, he hops on the couch and then tries to get to the window. The other thing is that you want to, again, inspect all of your floors. So if they crawl on a play mat, if you're on a rug, especially in a place that you eat food, because people drop food all the time. And again, they just have that hand to mouth association, and they can only deal with one stimulus at a time. So they, again, can't associate what is good for them to put in their mouth and what is bad. When they are able to eat food, you want to make sure that you're cutting it into very small pieces. Things like grapes, hot dogs, any circular object or food, I'm sorry, is the same size as their trachea. So if they swallow it without chewing it well enough, which many of them do, it could get lodged in their trachea, and that could be really detrimental if you don't know how to dislodge it pretty quickly. We talked a little bit about burns, but again, making sure that you're checking that water temperature with a baby thermometer before putting the child in. 90 degrees is the ideal temp for an infant or toddler. And cleaning is really great to do when your kids are napping. You never want to clean and have cleaning buckets out while the child is out and running around, because drowning is actually the #1 cause of death for children 1 to 4, and they can drown in as little as 1 inch of water. So, and they're usually, most of these deaths happen in the house. So they're from the tub not being drained, or cleaning buckets left out. And then also making sure that you're locking up all of your cleaning products, as well as medications. As you can see in this picture, things like drugs and detergents look exactly like candy or juice. And a kid doesn't know the difference. And so they will potentially just drink or eat either of these. Sorry, you can continue. I think I'm running low on time here. That might be it. Perfect. And I think at this point we are going to take questions.
Thank you, Barbara. It's really helpful to get so much clear information about safety for our little ones, and to be reminded of how that basic singular sensory experience is, right? They touch something and they just want to put it in their mouth. They just want to move. They want to see things. And so for us to be mindful of all the things we can do to keep them safe is so helpful. And I know as a new parent, it wasn't stuff that I always was able to understand or know about. So now we want to go ahead and move to the question and answer period. We have a few really excellent questions, so I want to thank you all who have been chiming in. And just a reminder, you can continue to put questions into the Q&A box. Just hit on that little tab and you can type your questions in. So the first one is for Dr. Fay. If you could talk a little bit about any thoughts you have around breastfeeding and the use of marijuana during breastfeeding.
Thanks, Aisha. That's a great question. I would say in general for breastfeeding, we certainly encourage breastfeeding, and are happy to support moms who are breastfeeding or need any additional breastfeeding support, including like support with the latch or support with their, making sure that they have adequate supply. And it certainly provides a lot of nutritional value and benefits and support for the newborn. In terms of breastfeeding around marijuana, that's a great question. And, I think in general, we usually encourage parents who are breastfeeding to ideally not participate in any sort of recreational substances and or other substances as the full impact on the baby is still, questionable or unknown. But do think that it's wonderful that families want to breastfeed, and we definitely support that. And usually recommend, sort of not breastfeeding, and part in using other substances and or recreational things with breastfeeding.
As a point of clarification, when you say recreational substances, so could you, alcohol, marijuana, any other drugs that are considered recreational that people do for fun?
Correct.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure our audience does too. This is a question, I think, for Dr. Fay, but also Aditi, I think this might be something you could chime in on, so maybe you can go ahead. There's a question around if there's specific sort of evaluations, ways that parents of newborn babies can really be sure that their child is doing well as far as reflexes, heart, breathing, etc. But I think that this question is also tied to how are children doing emotionally? How do we know our little babies are doing emotionally? So maybe you could speak a little, and then Faye.
Thank you, Aisha. What a thoughtful question. So yes, right, our babies come into the world with their personhood, and they come into the world with their own capacities, right? We're not saying any baby, we're saying your baby comes with their personality, with their capacities and strengths, and ways to tell you their needs. And so if I had one mantra to share, I wish I did this with my own baby, but I usually is like, if parents, if we read our babies' cues more and read less of books about what all babies do, and really go from what your baby is showing you, and then really, like what Dr. Fay said,
En vez de leer tantas cosas.
my baby is like showing me
Oh,
is pretty fussy a lot of times. I don't know what to do. I've tried all my tricks.
saber qué es lo que nuestros bebés.
And but this doesn't feel all right. I will say if something doesn't sit right for you, you have the most number of opportunities. You are your parents, you are the expert of your child. Sometimes it won't feel like that, but yes, you are. You have more opportunities to know your child than any of us as your care village does. And so I would encourage, take those concerns to your pediatrician, take those concerns to your doctor, and be like, they will sit in curiosity with you to really pay attention to the newborn, like your newborn's behaviors as a way of a cue into their communication, a cue into like what they're telling you, not only with their needs, but with their strengths. And then, I'll let Dr. Fay jump in with other evaluations, but yeah.
Sure, and I agree, that's such a great and important question. And I agree, I think one of the things that we say to new parents and new families is that, they're home with the baby and they're spending the most time with the baby. And there's also that sort of gut maternal and parental instinct as well too. Whereas as you said, in a lot of ways, you are the expert of your baby because you're there, and oftentimes your gut is usually right. But also to know that, as you sort of spend time with your baby and you're there, if you are concerned that something seems abnormal or doesn't seem quite right, or you're not sure, that's absolutely the time to call your care team or your medical care team's office. Call your pediatrician's office. You can talk to the nurse, you can talk to your pediatrician or your provider or your nurse practitioner. We will, if there's concerns, oftentimes we will bring you into the office, and that way we can really appreciate and understand what the concerns are. We can examine the baby. We can check to see, what's normal breathing, even for breathing, right? Sometimes in the beginning, babies sometimes breathe a bit fast, and it can be a little scary. And there's normal breathing. There's what we call periodic breathing, where they breathe really quickly and then they pause, and then that gets better. And then there's a problem with the breathing, they're in respiratory distress. So we can talk to you about your questions and concerns. We can review what's normal, what's abnormal. We can hear what you're seeing because we're not there. We can hear what you're seeing at home, what's making you feel worried. And we can talk about development. We can review sort of what the spectrum is, right? Remember, everybody doesn't do the same thing at the exact same time. And we can talk about what the baby's doing now, what we expect to happen next, and sort of the general time frame that it should happen. So please, if you're worried, don't stay home and worry alone. All questions are good questions. And that's why we're here. That's what we're here for, as part of the journey to partner with you, so that we make sure that things are going well.
Thank you, Faye and Aditi. I have a couple questions here about beds for Barbara. And then Faye, if you could just peek into the chat, I think there's a question about breastfeeding while being treated for cancer. If you could answer with typing, I think that would be great. The questions about the beds, and I'm just asking Dr. Faye to answer in the chat because we're a little short on time, but there are two questions. So one is sort of, if there are alternative beds for babies, should they always be in a crib, or what about bassinets until at the very beginning, until the baby outgrows the bassinet? Or what about a pack and play with the top bassinet and also the bottom option? What do you think is best? And sort of part of that question is also, if the mattress feels a little bit hard, especially for a baby who might be getting a little bit older, is it okay? Or is the safest thing to just leave the mattress hard, or should I put a pad down and try to make it softer?
So we never want to add things to the mattress. It is hard on purpose, again, to minimize the fact that if they happen to rule, because once they get to 3, 4, 5 months, depending on how they develop or how quickly they develop, they can start rolling over, and you're not going to be up in the middle of the night staring at them. So we want to make sure that if they do roll over, that they're not going to get suffocated in any of that plush material. So definitely not putting any blanket underneath the child until they're old enough to get into the toddler bed, which again is kind of a developmental thing. Usually it's about 2 that they go into the toddler bed, but that kind of varies. And then as far as the bassinet, as long as the bassinet is that hard material and is not soft, as a newborn, they can use the bassinet or the pack and play.
Moisés, asegúrese de que no tiene nada más ahí en el verano.
Pajamas versus putting a blanket on top of them.
Thank you, Barbara. That's really helpful. We have one more question around formula and milk. So the question is, my baby's 5 months old and he still drinks milk every 3 hours. He takes formula since I couldn't feed him, and this is new for me. When will his feeding schedule improve? Maybe 6 months or more? And I think that's for Dr. Faye.
So that's a great question. And you highlight something that's so true, and that every baby is so different and unique. And that certainly would also be a good question to also review with your pediatrician or care team, specific to your child. But in general, kids usually feed every 2 to 3 hours, and as they grow, usually by the 3rd month, 4th month, most kids tend to feed more and are able to space out their feeds. We hope to get them to like 4 hours, 5 hours by the time they're around, 5 months of age. Some families also will start to introduce solid foods between the age of 4 months to 6 months. So sometimes add in some cereal, at night to the formula, or add in a solid food closer to bedtime. Sometimes will help them to stretch a little bit at night so that they're sleeping longer, they're full longer. And then that way they're sleeping a little bit more at night and they feed more during the day. But it can be hit or miss. Every baby's so different. But I would expect, now that you're starting to add solids, that will start to space out for you, and the baby will drink more, feed more, and have longer intervals in between.
Thank you, Dr. Faye. And we have one more question. I would just love if could you speak a little bit to the kind of how common postpartum depression is in communities, and really how often it's happening in my community, and especially during COVID. Is that something that's been impacting families and their emotional health?
Yes, such a relevant question, Aisha. Thank you. So, the CDC has, I'm not going to pull out statistics, but it's extremely common both with men and women, like fathers and mothers, right? 1 in 10 women will have some sort of postpartum emotional complications. And you add COVID to it, and we're learning a lot more studies now from COVID, right? But the experience of how isolating, going back to the village, right? Parenting and getting into parenthood, even the idea of being able to share it with others and be able to see others, all that has changed from the get-go, from the hospital birth all the way transitioning home. And so I will say it is extremely common, and we should be talking more about it, which I think a lot of community providers do. Um, the as a provider and as a parent, one of the biggest pieces is to have your village, have somebody in your informal supports be the one looking out for you. When I was pregnant, I had a postpartum emotional plan that I asked my partner to pay attention to, because if I was in the depth of it, I might not pay attention to it. And so even it doesn't have to be a formal plan. It is treatable with support, and it's completely extremely common. And so your health and well-being is really, really key to your child's well-being. And I say this both for mothers and fathers. That's the other piece people don't talk about: postpartum emotional complications in fatherhood. And it happens, and it's again extremely treatable with one-on-one like therapy work, but also group support. Like there's multiple ways. And so being able to really seek out from your providers, just getting resources or the postpartum support, and they'll directly, confidentially share information with you and link you directly to a community provider.
And the
Thank
other
you,
thing I'll add
Aditi.
really quickly to that too, is that, you don't have to stay home and wait until your 6-week postpartum visit too. If you feel like, I'm not sure if this is normal, I'm not sure if this is okay. You can always call your doctor if you are worried. And also at your pediatric visits for your baby, we also do check-ins. We see how you're doing. Does there need postpartum blues? We also screen and ask about depression, postpartum depression, sadness, anxiety, or other concerns. And your pediatrician's office can also help to connect you either back to your OB and or to resources in the community to help you get connected with support. So if there's any questions or concern, please ask for help on the phone, ask for help at your pediatrician's visit, your OB visits, because there's lots of opportunities to connect you as well to support.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fay. Well, we're getting ready to close up, but any of the final questions in the chat, we've seen some more questions about food. I just want to thank folks for really staying engaged and asking your questions. And I think, what Dr. Fay and Aditi and Barbara have really shared with us today is the value of realizing that you are not alone in this new parenting journey, and in all of the wonderfulness and overwhelming sleep-deprived days, you are not alone. And even if you are a little bit isolated, there are resources to make sure you are connected. So if you don't have a pediatrician yet, if you don't have your own personal doctor yet, if you aren't sure how to reach out for help from friends and family, just know that it's okay. There are no wrong questions, and we're going to make sure we send you resources in the follow-up. If you already have connections and you have friends who maybe are feeling a little isolated, please remember the notes and messages from this conversation. Share resources with them. On that point, you can certainly continue to share the fact that we have more events coming throughout the rest of the week as part of this week's community baby shower. You can go to the United Way of Mass Bay's website, and there's full information. You can join on any day, and these are posted on Facebook Live. There's lots of ways to access this. So now we just want to show you a video, and this is a video from The Basics, a program that is really a set of tools to help families with raising their children from birth to 3 years old. And this video is called Talk, Sing, and Point, and it really highlights early communication skills. And if you want to learn more, you can sign up at the link on the screen to receive text messages giving you information and tips around how you and your child can grow happy and smart while supporting your relationship together and grow together. So we hope to see you tomorrow when you want to hear about the WIC program and breastfeeding and bringing home a newborn. And congratulations again on growing your families. Thank you for all of your engagement today.
How do children learn to communicate?
That's right.
Bananas, yes. Okay.
Children are learning language from the moment they're born, so we need to narrate life from the very beginning.
Are you ready to take a nap soon, or are you ready to eat?
Language learning happens in the context of the relationship between the parent and the child.
I really like to just keep my eye contact. That's like a huge thing.
When you get really close with your baby and you are having that eye contact and you're going back and forth, you're teaching them what communication is all about. You're teaching them what love and relationships are all about.
Wow, what color is that?
It's purple!
It is purple. Amazing.
A parent should speak to the child in whatever language the parent is most comfortable speaking. It doesn't really matter. It's the human voice, it's the communication.
If I were to talk to her in English right now and then switch to Spanish, she'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just awesome. Aquí, aquí, aquí. Ready? Go. Good job.
When they express a thought, repeat the thought and elaborate, add a word to it. They say, oh, that's a house. You say, yes, that's a blue house. Or that's a car. Yes, that's a big car.
No, so bigger.
They are bigger. I know. Remember when they were much smaller? They've gotten much, much bigger.
Eat them.
Not yet.
You will be adding words to their vocabulary.
Let's take a walk, a lovely bubbly walk.
Singing can make communication lots of fun. Anything you can say in real words, you can express in a song.
Children love singing and love the rhythm, and they remember the song, and so they're able to participate. One green and speckled frog sitting on a speckled log, eating the most delicious bugs. Yum, yum. One dives into the pool.
Children like to sing. Babies like to hear you sing. Your baby is your most admiring audience.
They look azul.
If you point at what you're talking about, it will give them an idea of what it is you're talking about. They'll start to associate words with objects. And after a while, they will start to point.
Hello.
So when we talk about point, sing, talk, those are all ways of connecting with your child.
Always talk to your baby. They can understand so much more than you think they can. It's a way of loving them to talk to them.
How do you help your child to learn about communication and language? Which of your family members and friends should also see this video? Please join us and help spread the word.